Hey, I'm Emanuelle, and today I'm going to draw my life. My life began on June 5th, 2000, when I was born in a hospital in downtown Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I was born into a family of my mom, Claudia, my dad, David, and my brother, Eli, who's 3 years older than me. My parents loved the Hebrew letter Ayin, which explains the first letter of my brother's name, Eli, as well as my name, Emanuelle, which means God is with us. For the most part of my life, I lived in downtown Toronto in an area called the Annex right beside Koreatown. One thing I remember from that area was that there was a pornographic film theater really close to my house with the name Emanuelle plastered across the top, the only place I've ever seen my name spelled the way I spell mine, and I would get so embarrassed whenever walking past it with other people. Not fun. I attended an elementary school, Palmerston Public School, from kindergarten to grade 6, which was right around the corner from my house. Life growing up was great. I participated in a lot of sports teams and clubs, acting classes, dance, and more. Since I was 8 years old, I've been going to Camp Gesher, a Jewish summer camp in Ontario, Canada that's part of Habonim Dror, an international youth movement. Growing up, most of my friends were Christian or atheist, besides the odd few. The Jews that I did know, I knew through my camp or through a program called Hillel, a Sunday school. I remember dreading to have to wake up early on the weekends for years to go to Jewish Sunday school. There, I learned the Hebrew alphabet and Jewish stories from Jewish heroes to holidays. Although always dreading it, now I'm glad that I went because it was such a crucial base for my Jewish education and identity. I remember for Passover, my family would drive from Toronto to Montreal to have a seder with my cousins, aunt, and uncle. And although I loved being there, it was terrible going over Passover because that meant that I couldn't have all the amazingly delicious looking and probably amazingly delicious Quebecois bakery goods. Growing up, my family was always fortunate enough to travel, and vacationing has always been my favorite thing to do. I've been to many incredible places around the world, including Costa Rica, Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Italy. I remember as a kid, I always wanted to be a fashion designer. And when we went on a trip to Asia, I was 8 years old, and the whole trip I spent sketching and designing clothes and then running to show my parents each new drawing. When I was in grade 5, my family flew to Israel for 6 months. We lived in Kfar Netter, and I went to a school called Weitzman in a neighboring Mashav, Beit Joshua. I hated it there, and all I wanted to do was go back to Canada and be with my best friends, Miranda, Mary Margaret, and Leah. To distract myself from being so unhappy in Israel, I joined a sewing after-school activity in Ramat HaSharon. I would sew and sew and sew, everything from shorts to dresses to bags. That was the one thing I absolutely loved about life in Israel. That and my best friend from school, Ophir, who also lives in Kfar Netter. Eventually, after 6 months, as planned, we went back to Toronto and I couldn't have been happier. That's a little magnifying glass of me being happy. I didn't like life in Israel, and contrary to that, I had the best year in grade 6 back at elementary school in Toronto. After a year back in Toronto, my parents came to the dinner table one evening with some pretty shocking news. "We're moving to Israel," they told my brother and I. I was the angriest I'd ever felt. I didn't understand how after such a terrible time we would still be moving to Israel. I started grade 7, middle school, at a new school with all of my Toronto friends and met many new people there as well. But surely enough, November came along, and on the 19th, we made the move. On the way to Israel, we had a layover in Amsterdam, and decided to stay there for 3 days. I was having a great time in Amsterdam, but was dreading the arrival in Israel. When we finally made it to Israel, we were staying in Herzliya for 2 weeks before moving into Kfar Netter. The biggest perk of living in Israel is that we had lots of family, who at this point we were seeing lots of. When we moved into Kfar Netter, that's when I began school. I went to school in Chof HaSharon in Kibbutz Shvaim for the rest of grade 7 and absolutely dreaded it. I remember the last day of grade 7 leaving the gates of the school for the last time as one of my greatest memories. The next year in grade 8, I went to Miתrim and already liked it a million times more than my last school. I'd always considered myself, like the rest of my family, a secular, relatively traditional Jew. The extent of my independent Judaism was deciding to stop mixing meat and milk in grade 4. At first at Mitzrayim, I felt the same way, but for the first time in my life I was exposed to religious Judaism, and before long I started to learn more and more about my religion in different lights, experiencing my first time keeping Shabbat and much more. Since then, I feel much more connected to religious Judaism than before, as well as Jewish history and identity. As of today, I'm glad I live in Israel. Although hard at first, I think it was a great decision that my family made, and it has brought a different kind of meaning into my life. I still like Miתrim. I always enjoy going back to Canada to visit my friends, and overall, I'm just happy. The end. Well, for now.